Welcome to Fun Fold Cards. Today we are going to make a beautiful kite card. And this is a great card to be able to use up those bits and pieces that you have left from a collection, because we're not using too much today to create this card. So you will need some plain cardstock, some decorative cardstock, scrap bit of paper with some clear embossing powder, or you could use the distress embossing glazes, a distress oxide, I'm using chipped sapphire today, and a stamp of your choice. You'll need your heat gun, you'll need your paper trimmer and your scoreboard, and of course your adhesives to put everything together. So the first thing that we'll need to do is to cut the card base. So our card base is just 5 7/8 by 4 1/8. So it's just a standard size card, but instead of making a folded card over, we've just got one single card base to sit our kite on. And then we need to cut some decorative cardstock. You want to use something that is quite plain, so probably the B side of a lot of decorative papers, as this is what we're going to stamp on with our embossing. So that needs to be cut down to 5 3/4 by 4 inches, and that will be mounted onto our card base. So before we make the card, we'll go ahead and stamp and emboss this decorative cardstock, and then we will move on to the kite card. So to do this one, it's just standard embossing, nothing too fancy. We're going to do these in different locations along this one. Remember, with the distress oxides, and especially with a stamp like this one, it's not using a lot of ink, so you don't want to do like the whole thing stamped before adding your embossing powder on. So you want to do 2 or 3 stamps first and then emboss those ones. So just random locations, random orientations as well. So stamping those on, cover on, and we'll emboss. So the clear embossing powder makes it nice and glossy and shiny, and it keeps that colour beautiful underneath. So it's just another great way of being able to use our distress oxides. Because they are a pigment and dye fusion, they take that little bit longer to dry, which gives us time to add some embossing powder and it will stick to it. So remember, with your heat gun, to heat it up for about 30 seconds or so first. You get that nice and hot before you go into the embossing powder. It's less likely to spread it everywhere and it'll melt it straight away. Another tip is to lift it off your surface, and letting that air flow through the paper will help melt that embossing powder a lot quicker. And this is something that never gets old, watching this change happen as the embossing powder melts on your page. You don't want to sit it there too long, you want to just have a nice pass, see that change and move on to the next section. Beautiful, so we'll keep going up the rest of the page, doing it in random spots and pieces to fill up our background, and then we will adhere it on to our base cardstock, and then we'll come to making our kite. Once you have finished embossing your stamps, an optional extra, it's not something you have to do, but if you'd like to, grab a paintbrush and a spray bottle, add some ink to your mat, spritz it, and then paint inside your stamps. So it's not going to work with all stamps, but it's up to you. And you could always use a different color, but you'll find as you paint through that the embossing powder that has been set will resist the ink. So you don't have to worry about trying to be very particular when painting inside the stamp. Once you have finished painting your stamps inside your stamp, set aside to dry, clean your mat, and we will create our kite. Okay, so to make our kite to sit on the front of our card, we will need to cut our plain cardstock to 4 inches by 10 inches. Once you have cut your cardstock to 4 inches by 10 inches, you'll need a ruler and a pencil. And on the short end, both ends, you'll need to place a mark at 2 inches. And then along the sides, from both ends, you'll need to mark 3 inches. Okay, and before we trim those down, get our scoreboard out, place it on the long side, score at 5 inches, and then on your scoreboard you're going to line up the 3-inch mark on the left and the right opposite each other and score on the diagonal, and then the same on the opposite side. There we go. Okay, and with our paper trimmer, I'm going to line up the 2-inch and the 3-inch score mark in our trimmer and cut. Same on the other side, and then the same on the opposite end. To fold it into our kite, you need to fold it in half and then fold diagonally along your score lines. And then we're going to push these in to create our kite. There we go. Okay, so once this is dry, we can adhere this to our base. We're going to adhere the kite to the front, and then we'll cut some decorative panels. So right here you can add a magnet to keep it closed, or a Velcro dot would work just as well, and adding some twine for decoration. So we'll adhere those together. You can have it straight on or on the angle, it's up to you. And then we'll cut a piece of white cardstock to go on the base and a decorative cardstock to go over the top. So for the decorative cardstock, you'll need to cut your cardstock to 1 5/8 by 1 5/8. So you want to use cardstock that is double-sided. And something that is non-directional as well. And then the second piece is 2 5/8 by 1 5/8. And then just cutting them in half diagonally. And then our white cardstock, we're going to cut to 5 inches by 4 inches. Placing a pencil mark at the top at 2 inches. And on the sides at 3 inches. And on the bottom at 2 inches. And then creating those angles, lining up those marks. So we can adhere this one on. go, and then these ones on the front. And there's our finished kite. So just adding a magnet on under there, and then adding some twine. Once you've added your twine, then the last thing that you'd do would be add a sentiment. So to fit our beautiful kite card in, we will make a very quick envelope out of plain cardstock. To make the envelope for this card, we're going to do just like a simple box envelope, but it will fit in a standard size envelope as well. So to create this one, we're going to cut our cardstock to 6.5 inches by 10 3/4. So you could do this from plain cardstock, or you could do this from decorative cardstock as well. It just is up to you how you would like to make it. So grab your scoreboard, and we're going to score on the short side first. We're going to score at 1/4 inches all the way down, and at 6.25. Then on the long side, we're going to score at 1 3/4, 2 inches, 6 1/4, and 6.5. So we'll fold and burnish those score lines. And then we are going to cut our tabs out. Okay, so once you have folded and finished all of your score lines, we're going to cut tabs here in between. So cut these little squares, and sometimes it makes it much easier to use if you just taper in those edges. And cut the other side. Taper in those edges to create those tabs. Just makes it easier when you're adhering together. And then up the top, we're going to cut this strip out and then taper the edge. So cutting in here on the angle. So cutting second score line, then on the angle. So to put this one together, just going to need to put double-sided tape on, popping those tabs inside, and then adhering those edges together. And then this one sticks and comes over the back. This one isn't designed to tuck in, so this one just sits over the top. So we'll grab our tape, put that, here we go. So it is always best to use a strong tape when you are doing these boxes or envelopes or using a strong glue, because your standard double-sided tape may come off, may not seal as well. Okay, tuck those tabs in. Oops. And then seal up the sides. There we go. This is just a very quick, easy mini box or small thin box envelope to go with our card. So we hope you have enjoyed the class today, enjoyed making your kite and adding your sentiment onto the front and giving your special card away. We look forward to seeing you next time.